You ever wonder what's really out there in the Smokies? Not bears, not campers. I'm talking about them, the ones who watch from the trees. Tonight's stories aren't legend, they're warnings. Like this video to help more horror lovers find us. Comment where you're watching from. Every viewer is part of my horror family, and subscribe to support this channel and keep the stories coming. I don't know why I'm telling this now. Maybe because I still haven't fully accepted what I saw, or maybe because I need someone to believe me, even if it's just a voice on the internet. Back in 2018, I took a solo hiking trip through the Great Smoky Mountains. I'd been working a city job in Asheville, project manager at a small architecture firm, and I was losing my grip. I wasn't sleeping. I kept hearing phantom alerts from my phone, even when it was off. My therapist told me I needed disconnect time. I told her I'd hike it off. I picked a trail near Clingman's Dome, not the paved path everyone takes to the observation tower. I mean the backcountry roads that peel off toward Forney Ridge, Jonas Creek, and down toward Deep Creek. I planned 3 nights, packed light, stuck to the ridge lines, and avoided the campsites I knew got traffic. It was early October, that sweet spot time, when the air gets thin and clean, but the snow hasn't hit yet. Leaves underfoot were half dry, half wet, that noisy sucking crunch with every step. I carried bear spray, a basic first aid kit, and a map I barely looked at, because I'd hiked the Smokies since I was a teenager. But this time felt different, and not just because I was alone. There was a strange stillness in the air. I only realized it the second night, as I moved deeper into a bowl of hollows south of Clingman's. The birds were quiet, not dead silent, but watchful. That's the only way I can put it, like they were waiting for something. I noticed it first, while filtering water near a fallen log around dusk. I heard a dry shuffle, not a scurry, but slower, heavier, like something crawling under the leaves. I froze, listened, waited for the usual tail swish or wing beat or something to mark it as animal, but it didn't come, just the faintest ripple in the leaf litter, not moving away, not hiding, just waiting, right below me. I stepped back slowly, eyes scanning the forest floor, then crouched near the roots of a big beech tree. That's when I saw it. A hand, not a paw, not a claw, a hand, 5 fingers, human, but pale and waxy, like it hadn't seen daylight in years. The fingernails were dark, yellowed, no rings, no dirt, just skin and nail, and movement. It slowly retracted, pulling back under the mat of leaves, and into the soft mud under the root system, like it had been watching me from beneath. I didn't scream, I didn't run, not at first. I think my brain couldn't process it. I just backed up, stumbled, nearly dropped my filter. Then, when I finally turned to move, something in the woods clicked, like a joint snapping into place. I ran. I made camp a mile further on, as high as I could get on a spur ridge, with clear line of sight on all sides. I didn't eat, just sat in my tent, with my headlamp off, gripping the bear spray, like it could stop whatever that was. Sleep came in weird flashes, seconds at a time. I remember dreaming of breathing under the soil, of weightless pressure on my chest, of fingers tapping just beyond the fabric of my tent. When I woke, the zipper was cut, not torn, not clawed, cut, a clean deliberate slit from the inside. I checked my knife, still tucked under the sleeping bag where I'd stashed it, but the slit wasn't from that blade. It was thinner, almost surgical. Worse were the footprints, bare, human prints, circled the tent in the soft mud. Not just one set, 3, one large, one small, and one misshapen. Toes crooked, almost sideways, like it had never walked upright. They weren't deep like a man's prints. They were light, delicate, like someone tiptoeing with careful intent. I broke camp in 10 minutes and left food, tarp, and half my gear behind. The trail down toward Jonas Creek twisted between bluffs and gulches. I tried to follow the main ridgeline, but something was wrong with my compass. The needle would drift each time I stopped moving. I'd heard about magnetic anomalies near the dome. Locals blamed the iron in the rocks, but this was different. The forest around me changed. Familiar landmarks disappeared. I passed the same fallen cedar log twice, even though I'd taken different turns. Time started to get slippery. By noon the sun was high, but the woods felt darker, like something overhead was blocking more light than just leaves. I walked until I saw movement again, this time up ahead. I called out, thinking maybe it was a lost hiker, but it didn't turn. It just stood there, maybe 30 feet away, behind a curtain of hanging moss. Its arms were long, too long, and it didn't wear clothes, just skin the color of wet ash. I stepped forward. It stepped back, but not into the forest. Under it, it sank, like it had stepped into loose soil that folded over it like water. No splash, no collapse, just gone. I finally reached a clearing, where I recognized a stone cairn from a past hike. I remembered there were 3 of them, a marker for the turnoff toward an old shelter. But now, there were 4. The new one looked fresher, smaller stones, less moss. Something about it felt fake, like it had been built fast. Wrong. It faced a different direction, and carved on one of the flattest stones, shallow but visible, was my last name. It wasn't a common name. Then it wasn't there last year when I passed through. I didn't touch it. I just turned and kept walking. That night I slept on a rocky outcrop. No tent, just a thermal blanket, and my pack. I figured if something was coming, I'd rather see it from a distance. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I heard the whispering, not voices, but that low hushed brushing, like someone dragging their fingertips along the forest floor. It circled below me, just out of view. Then, silence, for 10 minutes, until something heavy thumped against the stone from below. Once, then again, then it stopped. I never saw what it was, but I watched the trees below sway, not from wind, but from movement beneath them. That sunrise, I stumbled toward the park boundary. Somewhere near Nolan Divide, I found an old trail sign, half rotted, barely legible, but it was the first thing I recognized in almost 24 hours. I radioed for help once I had signal, told the ranger I got lost and ran out of supplies, left out the rest. They picked me up near Deep Creek campground and drove me back to my car. Said nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I asked if there'd been any recent landslides or abandoned shelters. The ranger just raised an eyebrow and said, "Not in that sector. Forest's been still all season." Still, that word chilled me more than it should have. When I got home, I checked the photos on my phone. Most were there, except the ones from that second day. Just a few blurred shots of leaves. One had a dark shape in the corner, low to the ground. It looked like part of a hand. But here's the part that broke me. A week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single Ziploc bag, mud-stained, sealed, and inside it, the cut fabric from my tent zipper, still damp. I moved apartments after that, stopped hiking solo, took a desk job in Raleigh. But I swear, even now, I sometimes wake up to the sound of fingers brushing against my bedsheet. Slow, deliberate, dragging like they're looking for a seam to crawl through. If you ever hike past Clingman's Dome, stick to the paved trail. Don't wander the hollows. Don't follow the cairns. And if you hear something crawling beneath the leaves, don't look, because it might be looking back. I haven't hunted since that weekend. Haven't even set foot near the Smokies. And if I'm being honest, I still sleep with the lights on sometimes. Not because I think it followed me home, but because I don't think it had to. That place saw me, knew me, and I don't think it forgets. This happened in November of 2019, right before deer season. I was 32, still living in Bryson City, working nights as a correctional officer up at the Swain County Jail. It wasn't a great job, but it paid better than retail. And after 10 years of dealing with drunks and repeat offenders, I'd built a thick enough skin. My cousin Blake, he was more of a brother to me, had just moved back from Asheville after a bad breakup. He was looking for distraction, and I needed a weekend off-grid. So we loaded up the rifles and hiked out to a spot we used to hit with our uncles, a patch of game land above Fontana Lake, east of Eagle Creek, where the real backcountry starts. We didn't take a trail, didn't need to. We'd been up there as kids, building lean-tos and scaring ourselves with stories about wild men in the woods. The old legends, things our grandparents half-whispered after too much bourbon, about certain ridgelines you didn't walk after sundown. They used names like Ashtooth, or the one that watches, but never gave details. It was the kind of stuff you laughed off until you were alone out there, and the woods got too quiet. We pitched camp near a slope that dropped toward the lake. Cold wind, brittle leaves, that smell of mossy earth clinging to your boots. Everything felt just like it used to, until we found the cabin. It wasn't marked on any topo map I'd seen, just a short climb, off an overgrown drainage cut. Blake spotted the roofline first, dark wood half sunken into the ridge, like the mountain had tried to swallow it. At first we figured it was a trapper's shelter, but the closer we got, the stranger it felt. The walls were intact, but weather-warped. No lock on the door, just a slab of wood propped against it like someone wanted to suggest privacy without really enforcing it. And hanging from the eaves, a row of game hooks, but it wasn't empty. 4 haunches of fresh meat, still dripping. No rot, no flies, not deer, not hog, not anything I could immediately name. The cuts were clean but wrong, too uniform, almost like the muscle had been peeled in ribbons instead of butchered. No firewood stacked, no chimney smoke, no bedrolls, just meat, hanging in the cold like some silent offering. We stood there a long minute, both of us quiet, neither saying the obvious. Blake finally said it, "Someone's living out here." And that's when we noticed the trees, not around the cabin, beyond it. A stretch of woods too regular, too cleared, trees spaced out just enough to walk between. No brush, no low limbs, like something moved through them often. We backed away, circled down to our camp, and agreed to stay just one night. If the hunter showed, we'd apologize and move on. But we weren't the ones being watched. It started about 30 minutes before sundown. We were sitting by a low fire, boiling creek water, when Blake went stiff. His eyes locked past me, up the slope. I turned. There, between the trees, not 10 yards from where the cabin sat, someone stood watching us. No movement, no sound. He was naked from the waist up, skin streaked with what looked like soot or ash. His eyes were pale, not glowing, just wide and unblinking, and clenched between his teeth was something long, dark, and thin. A stick, I thought at first, but it curved slightly, like bone. He didn't flinch, didn't speak, just stood there, silent, watching. We didn't shout, we didn't run, we just froze. Blake slowly reached for the rifle beside him, and I remember whispering, "Don't." Something about it, about him, felt outside the rules. Not feral, not drugged, just other. He turned after a few seconds, and walked back into the woods without a sound. Not a single twig cracked under his feet. We stayed up all night. Next morning, we packed fast, left gear behind, didn't speak much on the hike back to the truck. But before we reached the trailhead, I made a mistake. I turned around. Blake didn't. He just kept moving. But I looked back up the slope. There, in the trees where we'd camped, someone had hung a fresh piece of meat from a low branch. Same ribbon style, same reddish gleam. And under it, pressed into the dirt, were two bare footprints, small, like a child's. Blake stopped talking to me for a while after that, said he felt sick, kept dreaming of long, silent corridors in the woods where something moved behind him, but never touched. Said he'd wake up choking, not on air, but on something bitter, like smoke. He moved to Boone a few months later, got into woodworking, keeps to himself now. I did some digging. There are old ranger records, unofficial, handwritten stuff, that mention cabins being abandoned near Fontana back in the 40s, something about forced relocations, unregistered residents. One note just says, "Third hollow from Old Eagle Road, leave it." They still walk. I went back once, stupidly, in the spring of 2021, stayed on the main trail that time, didn't go near the ridge, but even from the lake's edge, I could see the roofline, still there, still watching. Sometimes when the wind cuts just right, I smell smoke and iron, and sometimes I dream of being back in that circle of trees, not walking, but crawling, dragging myself forward, because something in the earth won't let me stand. And in that dream, I see him again, naked, soot-smeared, eyes too wide, clenching a new shape between his teeth. This time, it's a hunting knife, and it's mine. I don't take dogs into the mountains anymore. People think that's odd. I'm a backpacker, after all. And everyone online loves the idea of some mutt with a bandana trotting beside them through fall leaves and fog. But no, not after what happened in Tremont. Still can't say it out loud without shaking a little. This was 5 years ago, October 2020, right in that window between COVID lockdowns, when the park started letting campers back in. Everyone was crowding the main routes, Klingman's Dome, Cades Cove. But I knew better. I knew where to go to be alone. I grew up around Townsend, Tennessee. My dad was a trail crew worker back in the 80s, and he taught me to stay off the marked trails if I wanted real quiet. There's an old fire road in the Tremont area that runs off an abandoned logging spur, deep into the woods beyond the old rail grade. It doesn't appear on modern maps, but the ruts are still there if you know where to look. I'd camped out there dozens of times, never had a problem. I brought my dog with me that trip. Boone, 4 years old, shepherd mix, smart as hell. He never ran off, until that night. It was the second night in early dusk, cool but not cold yet. I'd set up camp along a rise above a dried-out stream bed. The place smelled like wet stone and leaf mold. Clean, familiar. Boone had been sniffing around the periphery all evening. Nothing unusual, until he went still. I looked over, and he was locked in, ears stiff, eyes fixed on the hollow below us. Then he bolted. Didn't bark, didn't growl, just took off down the ridge into the trees. I shouted his name. Nothing, just the quick patter of paws fading into the dark. I grabbed my light and ran after him. I didn't think, just moved. The fire road dipped into the hollow. That's when I realized how dead the air was down there. No crickets, no birds, just a weird soft echo of my own boots on damp leaves. Boone's prints were easy to spot. The dirt was soft, broken with claws. I followed them down past a stand of poplar that arched like a gate into the lowland, and that's when I saw it. Not Boone. There were 5 of them, figures, human mostly, naked or close to it, covered in dirt and leaves, crouched low in a circle around something furry, limp. My dog. They didn't flinch when I burst through the brush, didn't react at all, just turned to look at me, slowly, like insects pivoting toward heat. Their skin was gray with filth, their eyes sunken like pits of ash. One had a broken arm that hung at the wrong angle, another rocked slightly, chewing at the side of its hand like a rat. And the smell, it hit me too late. sour earth and rot, but underneath it, something older, like the stink of a cellar that hasn't been opened in generations. I shouted, waved my arms, stumbled forward and yelled Boone's name again. They didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Then all at once, like they'd agreed silently, they crawled away, not walked, not ran, crawled, backwards into the brush, like crabs vanishing under roots. No panic, no hurry. And Boone, he didn't move, but he was breathing, barely. I scooped him up and ran. Back at camp, I saw the fire had gone out. I don't remember putting it out. I didn't waste time. Packed everything into my pack half blind. Boone tucked under my arm, and hiked out by headlamp with a loaded revolver in my other hand. Took me 5 hours to reach the road. By the time I got there, Boone was awake but shaking. I never saw them again that night. But that wasn't the end of it. Boone changed after that. He wouldn't go outside unless I was with him. Refused to walk near trees. Wouldn't even step on fallen leaves. I took him to the vet twice. Clean scans. No trauma. No poisoning. Just fear. Constant fear. He wouldn't bark anymore either. Like something had taught him not to. I tried to forget it. Told myself it was squatters maybe. Meth heads. That kind of thing happens out there. But I kept replaying their eyes. Empty. Blank. Quiet. Not the eyes of someone hiding from society. The eyes of something that had never been part of it. I did some research. I found an old hiker forum archived from the early 2000s. There were posts about Tremont, ghost fire roads, ridge watchers, mud feeders. One post by a guy named Ali Trek 78 stuck with me. He said, "Don't go west of Cold Spring Branch. The hollows got the ones that crawl, not walk, crawl. They don't live, they wait." My granddad said they were left behind when the mountain moved. It was cryptic, but it felt real. I went back 6 months later. Call it stupid, call it obsession, but something in me needed to know, not to see them again, but to find out if it was all real. I didn't bring Boone. I went in daylight, hiked the same road, down the same hollow, but the trail was different. The stream bed was gone, like it had never existed. In its place was a grove of young trees, too young to have grown in 6 months, pine saplings, all the same height, and near the center, I found something I hadn't seen before, a cairn, small maybe 2 feet tall, carefully stacked, bones wedged between the rocks, not animal bones, something longer, human-sized, and laid on top gently, like an offering, one of Boone's old red booties, the ones he wore when it snowed. I hadn't packed those on the last trip. I left immediately, didn't look back, didn't speak, drove straight home, and burned my hiking clothes. Boone died a year later, tumor in his spine, fast. The vet said it must have been growing for a while, undetected. I buried him in the yard, far from the woods. Haven't camped since. I still live near the Smokies, still hear stories. Folks talk about things in the Tremont drainage, noises, shadows, weird paths that loop back to the same stump no matter how far you walk. A ranger I met once, at a gas station in Walland, told me, they don't patrol that far west anymore. Said, that part of the mountain doesn't want eyes on it. Sometimes I dream of Boone standing at the edge of the firelight, just like that night, silent, watching me, and behind him, 5 shapes crouched low, not moving, not breathing, waiting. If you go into Tremont, stay on the trails, don't follow old roads, don't chase your dog, and if you smell earth that's too sweet, like rot covered in flowers, don't look for the source, because whatever crawls in that hollow doesn't want to be found, and it doesn't forget the ones who saw it. I've driven those roads 100 times. The loop around Cades Cove, the winding backways that spider off toward Parsons Branch, Rich Mountain, or the old forestry cuts near Forge Creek. I know them in fog and sunlight. I know where the pavement disappears and the forest presses in, so close it feels like you're breathing pine instead of air. But what I saw that night, what I let into my truck, I still can't make peace with. This was fall of 2021, October, peak color season. I work maintenance for the Park Service. Nothing glamorous, mostly gravel grading, down tree clearing, the occasional bare barrel to drag up an incline. I'd volunteered for a late shift that Friday. Someone had reported rockfall out near the Gregory Ridge trailhead, so I took the old service road around the cove after dark, trying to beat the storm that was rolling in. The air smelled like damp leaves and wood rot, the kind of thick, sticky quiet that comes before rain. My high beams cut through the fog in patches, bouncing off trunks like bones in the dark. And then I saw her. She was just standing there on the side of the road. No flashlight, no car, no shoes, barefoot, wrapped in what looked like a hospital blanket, thin, tan, torn at one corner, hair hanging in long matted ropes, down past her shoulders, pale, dirty, not wild-eyed, not frantic, just empty, like she'd been walking forever. I slowed, cracked the window, asked if she was okay. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, swaying slightly, like her legs didn't remember how to stop. I got out, stepped into the wet gravel, and that's when she whispered it. They won't let me leave. That's all. Quiet, like she was stating a fact. I helped her into the passenger seat. She didn't resist, didn't even meet my eyes, just held that blanket tight around her and stared out the windshield as I drove. I tried to ask the usual questions. Name, what happened, if she was hurt. She didn't answer, not once, just kept looking straight ahead. Her feet were filthy, raw in places, the kind of damage you only get from walking barefoot over rock and root for days. The blanket barely covered her knees. Her shoulders trembled with every bump in the road, but she never flinched. I radioed ahead to the ranger station near the Abrams Creek area. They said they'd send someone to meet me at the south gate, but we never made it there. About a mile out from the station, right where the trees tighten and the road dips, she spoke again. They're still walking. I glanced over. Her face hadn't changed, but she was crying. Not loud, just tears sliding down her cheeks without a sound, like her body remembered grief, even if she didn't. And then, without warning, she unbuckled her belt, shoved the door open, and ran. I slammed the brakes, jumped out, shouted after her, but she was fast, faster than anyone should be in that condition. She didn't run like someone escaping. She ran like someone returning. She disappeared into the woods, barefoot and silent. They never found her. I stayed at the ranger station till 2 in the morning, while they swept the area. Thermal drones, dogs, lights, nothing. The rangers were quiet. One of them, a guy named Hollis, who'd been around since the 80s, asked me to point exactly where she got in my truck. When I told him, he just nodded slowly. That stretch, he said, that's close to where we lost that other hiker last spring. I asked what he meant, and he didn't answer. I went back the next day, not because I expected to find her, but because something didn't sit right. I kept seeing her face, not scared, not confused, resigned. I parked just off the loop road and hiked toward the spot where she ran. The woods felt wrong, still, but not calm, heavy, like they were listening. I walked until I hit a clearing. I didn't remember being there. Not a meadow, just an empty bowl of land, sunken between low ridges. At the center stood 3 stone markers, not gravestones, not natural rock, placed. One was cracked down the middle, another had moss growing, in what looked like carved letters, worn away, unreadable. The third was flat, circular, maybe 2 feet tall, and placed neatly on top, folded, as if by careful hands, was the blanket, that same tan hospital blanket, still damp, still holding the shape of her shoulders. I left, didn't tell anyone, didn't report the find, just got in my truck, and drove home in silence. That night, I couldn't sleep, kept thinking about what she said. They won't let me leave, they're still walking. I started digging, old newspapers, death records, missing persons, found something strange. A woman named Carla Reese disappeared in that area in 1976, last seen near the Forge Creek Trail, 28 years old, no vehicle ever found. In 1983, a different woman, no relation, vanished near the same ridge, similar age, same time of year, always the same region, always October, always women, and in every report, the last known detail was the same, barefoot. The Park Service doesn't talk about it. The local guides steer people away with stories about bears or washed out trails. But I asked Hollis again, a few weeks later, caught him alone behind the station. He looked tired, said some of them come back for a while, not all the way, but enough to warn folks like you. Then he walked off and never spoke to me again. It's been 3 years. Sometimes I dream I'm driving that road again, windshield fogged, headlights flickering, and she's standing there again, blanket in hand, hair covering her eyes. But this time she doesn't get in, she just walks past me, and behind her, in the trees, I see them, not shapes, not shadows, faces, half seen in the brush, faces that look like they once belonged to people. People who were tired of walking, but who walk still. I don't drive that road anymore, not after dark, not alone. And if you ever find yourself on the south side of Cades Cove, and you see a woman walking barefoot, don't stop, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't follow her into the trees. I booked the cabin because I needed quiet, not mountain quiet, like some Instagram escape. I mean real silence, the kind that lets you sleep without sirens, without neighbors stomping upstairs, without a phone buzzing every 12 seconds. It was the week after my divorce finalized. I'd been living out of boxes in a Knoxville apartment. My job in landscaping had dried up for the season, and I was burnt out, heartbroken, and barely sleeping. A buddy of mine told me about this rental just east of Gatlinburg, up past the Greenbrier area, a small A-frame on private land, right along the edge of the park boundary. No cell service, no internet, just trees, wind, and space. The listing called it Ever Still Cabin. That should have been the first warning. It was late October, peak leaf color. I drove up through a maze of gravel switchbacks, past old barns and shuttered cabins, until the road narrowed to a single lane, barely wide enough for the truck. I got there just before dusk. The air was cold in that damp, heavy way that says frost is coming. The trees creaked gently, leaves blew in loose, spiraling flurries. The cabin itself was plain, clean, small porch out front, stacked firewood, single-pane windows that looked like they'd fog up if you even exhaled too hard. The woods pressed in on 3 sides, but there was a clearing to the west, a steep drop-off with a view of the dark ridge beyond. It smelled like pine and wet rock, the kind of Appalachian quiet that doesn't feel peaceful, exactly, more like watched. But I was too tired to care. I lit a fire, ate something frozen, and passed out on the couch. That first night was dreamless. The second night was not. I woke up at 3:09 a.m. I remember the exact time, because the analog clock on the nightstand had glowing green hands, and I stared at them too long, trying to convince myself I was still dreaming. The whispering had woken me, not a scream, not a bang, just voices murmuring, too soft to make out. 2 at first, then 3, 1 male, 1 female. The rest, I couldn't tell. They weren't yelling, they were talking, conversing, and then giggling, the kind of soft, polite giggles you might hear from kids hiding behind a couch. I froze. The voices were right outside the bedroom window, not on the porch, not on the steps, right beneath the glass. I didn't look, I don't know why, but every instinct told me not to move, not to give them anything back. So I lay there, eyes on the clock, heart pounding. The voices faded after a few minutes, faint footfalls, leaves brushing against wood. Then, nothing. I told myself it had to be raccoons, maybe local kids, maybe I'd left food out and attracted animals. But the next morning, I found something that made that impossible. On the porch, near the wood pile, were 4 small piles of bones, not scattered, arranged. Little bird skulls, chipmunk ribs, tiny vertebrae, all laid out in careful concentric circles, like someone had built shrines out of death. No blood, no fur, just bone, perfectly clean. There were no prints, no claw marks, no mess. I swept the porch, packed some of my gear, drove into town, and asked the sheriff if there had been reports of strange behavior or trespassing near Greenbrier. He didn't laugh, didn't act surprised. He just stared at me a long time, then said, "You need to pack up and drive out the way you came." Now, I pushed back, asked what he meant. He said nothing else, just walked back inside the station and closed the door behind him. So I drove back up. I meant to leave that night. I did, but something, I don't know, pulled at me. Told me to wait, told me to stay one more night, just one. I lit a fire, locked the doors, turned on every light, tried to read, until sleep finally clawed its way in, and at exactly 3:09 a.m., I woke up again. The whispering was louder this time, more voices, 5, maybe 6, all overlapping, not angry, not excited, just curious. A low rhythmic cadence, like storytelling, then a pause, then laughter, not sharp or mocking, more like agreement, like something was funny, in a way I wasn't meant to understand. I couldn't move, not because I was frozen with fear, but because something, somehow, was holding me still, like the room itself had thickened. Then, a knock, just once, on the window, soft, measured, like a request, not a threat. I squeezed my eyes shut. I don't know how long I stayed like that, maybe an hour, maybe longer. When I woke, the fire was out, and the front door was open. The porch had new bone circles, larger now, more complex, 5 of them, spiral patterns, all pointing inward toward the door. Inside by the fireplace, I found a single owl feather, placed gently on the rug. I left that morning, didn't clean, didn't check out, just grabbed my pack and drove. I don't remember the road, just remember the trees, looking taller, closer, like they were bending toward the cabin, or watching me leave. Back in Knoxville, I tried to forget it, told myself it was exhaustion, stress, some elaborate prank, but that smell, the faint sweet, rotting floral scent that clung to the bones, I kept smelling it, in my car, in my apartment, in my clothes, and some nights, even now, I still wake up at 3:09 a.m., and I swear I hear the faintest giggling from just beyond the window pane. 2 months later, I looked up the parcel where the cabin sat. It's not listed anymore. The owner pulled the land off every rental platform. But I found something strange. The cabin's original name wasn't ever still. It was once called Crow Sisters Hollow, a regional name, never officially marked. There's an old folk tale tied to that slope, whispered stuff, rarely written down. People used to say the woods there didn't have ghosts, they had listeners, and if they liked your story, they'd keep you. I think the whispering wasn't just sound, I think it was invitation. They didn't knock to come in, they knocked to ask why I hadn't come out. If you ever rent a cabin near Greenbrier, and you wake up to voices outside your window, don't open the curtain, don't answer the knock, and whatever you do, don't laugh. It was supposed to be a chill weekend hike. Just 3 of us, me, my brother Nate, and his friend Joel, taking a break from our jobs, phones, and 1,000 little fires that make up regular life. I'd been working remotely for a logistics firm in Chattanooga. Nate was welding full-time, and Joel was between construction gigs. We all needed a reset. Mount LeConte was a familiar name. We weren't hardcore through hikers or anything, but we'd done enough backcountry camping to know what we were doing. Packed light, brought the topo maps, left a trail report with the park office. We took Trillium Gap Trail on the way in, lesser trafficked than Alum Cave, steeper, more remote. That's what we wanted. The first night was quiet, clear skies, air crisp but not cold, a little breeze in the trees that sounded like water flowing overhead. Nate joked about Appalachian tree whispers, and Joel said we'd be lucky to even see a bear that deep in. We hung our bear bag, double knotted it high in a tree like we always did, and crashed under our shared tarp near a wide shelf overlooking the valley. I remember the scent of pine and that deep loamy soil smell. I remember thinking, I needed this, and I remember what we found the next morning. The food was gone, not scattered, not torn, just gone. Bag still hanging in the same place, line intact, knot still tight, not even a scratch on the bark, no drag marks, no claw rakes, no wrappers on the ground, just an empty space in the bag, like it had never been filled at all. Joel laughed it off. Black bears are smart, he said. Maybe one unknotted it and retied it for fun, but that joke didn't land. We were experienced enough to know that wasn't how bears worked. They tear, chew, smash. They don't remove and replace, and we knew what raccoons or squirrels would leave behind. This wasn't that. I remember looking up at the bag, still swinging slightly in the morning wind, and feeling something quiet slide down my spine. Not fear, exactly, just wrongness. Nate muttered, maybe we're not the only ones out here. We shrugged it off, ate what was left from our pockets, trail mix, a half-smashed protein bar, and decided to keep moving. One more night out. Joel had a backup meal packet. We figured we'd hike down via Brushy Mountain the next day, and hit a diner in Gatlinburg. That night, the woods didn't feel quiet anymore. We camped just off the connector trail, high enough to catch wind, with a good view of the slope below. Stars were out, trees whispering again, but colder now, like the wind had changed direction, and came from the woods, not just through them. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, I heard coughing, not the dry bark of a fox or a bear grunt, human coughing, close. It started behind the tarp, maybe 30 feet back. 2 coughs, raspy, like someone old or sick. I sat up fast, heart pounding, trying to get my bearings. Then silence. I whispered to Joel, nothing. He was already awake. I could see the tension in the way he was breathing. Eyes open, staring up. Then another cough, closer now. Nate sat bolt upright, grabbed the headlamp. That's when I whispered, don't turn it on, because I felt it, not just the sound, the presence. Something was watching, waiting. After a minute, the sound stopped. We stayed still until sunrise. In the morning, we found something beside the fire pit. One of Nate's boots, his left one, was missing from his bag, and placed about 5 feet from the top. Right next to it, a small careful pile, ash pine needles, berries, to bone fragments the size of sunflower seeds, arranged neatly, like a small altar or an offering, a trade. Nate stared at it a long time. He never said a word, just picked up his boot, shook it out, and put it on. Joel kept saying it had to be some backwoods loner. People live out here, man. It's not all parkland. Squatters, survivalists. You've heard the stories, but there weren't any footprints, no broken branches, no drag marks or gear missing, just that single cough in the dark, and the quiet gift left behind. We packed up before noon, hiked faster than normal. I don't remember talking much, but somewhere along the ridgeline, something changed. We passed the same twisted pine tree twice, the one with a big scar like a lightning burn across the trunk. We knew we'd already passed it. The trail curved the same way, same pile of stones, same patch of rust-colored moss near a log. We were looping. We checked the map, the compass. Everything should have been downhill. We hadn't changed direction. Joel swore and said, "We need to go off trail. Cut a straight line west, find the gravel service road and follow it out." We agreed. That was the mistake. The woods off the trail were darker than they should have been, no matter the direction. The slope kept climbing. Trees grew closer together. The air felt thick, heavy. It started raining lightly, just enough to make everything slick. I don't know how long we walked. Time didn't feel right anymore. Then we heard it again, the cough. This time it was in front of us, and then a second one, to our left, and then from somewhere behind. Low and clear, hungry, not a whisper, not a scream, just one word, spoken soft, like breath on glass. We ran. Eventually we burst into a clearing, a real one, tall grass, thistle, an old stone foundation sunk into the mud, and just ahead, a road, gravel, real, not on the map, but real. We didn't ask questions. We followed it until we saw a power line, then a signpost, rusted and bent, pointing nowhere. By dusk, we flagged down a farmer in a pickup headed toward Cosby. He didn't ask much, just looked at our clothes, our faces, and nodded like he understood more than he let on. Back home I tried to find that road on satellite images. Never could. Nate doesn't hike anymore. Joel won't even camp in his own backyard. I talked to a retired ranger a few months later, told him the story, left out some details to avoid sounding crazy. He listened, then said, "You ever hear of Trade Hollow?" I shook my head. He looked away. "Some of the old-timers say there's land out there that remembers what was taken from it. They say the mountain makes deals. Not fast, not fair, but quiet. You leave something, it leaves something back. I don't know what we left behind, or what followed us home, but sometimes when I'm out walking near the woods behind my house, I find small piles, ash, bone, berries, and sometimes I wake up in the night to the faint sound of coughing outside my window. Not close, not far, just waiting. If you ever hike near Mount LeConte and your food goes missing without a trace, or your gear moves in the night, don't call out, don't offer anything, and whatever you do, don't accept what's left behind. I haven't camped in Deep Creek since that weekend. It's been almost 18 years, but I still hear it sometimes. Not the scream itself, but the sound that came after, that laughter, ragged, too human to be an animal, too wrong to be a person, and I still don't know if we got away or if we just stopped hearing it. This happened in 2007. I was 24. My brother Kyle had just gotten out of the Marines, and I was in between jobs after college, drifting, mostly. I'd moved back in with our mom in Bryson City. Kyle was restless, always pacing the kitchen or walking the ridge roads at night. He wasn't talking much, but I figured getting him back out into the woods might help. We'd grown up in the shadow of these mountains. Deep Creek was one of those spots you go to if you live here. Not flashy like Clingmans or LeConte, but familiar, wild in that quiet way. We used to fish there with our dad before he passed, and after everything Kyle had seen overseas, I think he wanted to believe there was still peace somewhere in the world. We went in light, 2 packs, 1 tarp, stove, and sleeping bags, camped a few miles up from the trailhead, near Indian Creek Falls, late September, dry leaves underfoot, crisp air. The woods smelled like cedar smoke and cold moss. The first day was perfect. The second night wasn't. I remember sitting by the fire, watching embers drift, when the first sound came. It started high, almost a yowl, but it dropped midway, low, like someone trying to choke back a sob. It echoed through the trees, bending in the branches. Not a bobcat, not a coyote. I know those sounds. This was different. Kyle stood up fast, hand to his belt, even though he wasn't carrying. What the hell was that? I shrugged, like I wasn't rattled, but my hand was already reaching for the headlamp. Probably a cat, I said, maybe a fox. We didn't talk much after that, just let the fire burn low, and tried to sleep, but I kept one eye open, listening. In the morning, the dolls were there, 5 of them, hanging from a low, twisted branch, directly above our fire pit. We hadn't seen them the night before, and I swear, I looked up while stacking wood. They were handmade, knotted from corn husk, twine, little cloth scraps, tied around twig limbs, old, weathered, like they'd been left out in the rain for years. But they weren't decayed, just aged, preserved, and worst of all, arranged. Each one was positioned facing down toward the coals, heads tilted slightly, arms out, like they were watching. Kyle didn't say a word, just stared at them for a long time. Then he started packing. We didn't even eat, just rolled up our bags, doused the pit, and got moving. Neither of us wanted to say it out loud, but we both knew. They weren't there when we fell asleep. That meant someone had been close enough to walk into our camp, close enough to tie those things above us, without making a sound. And that wasn't even the worst part. There were no footprints. The soil was soft from the creek, but nothing, not even our own, from the night before. It was like the woods had swallowed the memory of our presence. About halfway back to the trailhead, the forest changed. You hear that a lot in stories, but it's real. You feel it. The birds go quiet. The canopy tightens. Even the air smells off, like rot, but deeper, sweet, but wrong, almost floral, but not from any flower you'd want to see. Kyle kept checking over his shoulder. That's when we heard the scream again, but this time, it was closer, sharper, and then it laughed. Not loud, not echoing, just a rasp of breathy chuckles right after the wail, like someone laughing at their own joke. We stopped cold. The laughter didn't fade. It just stopped, mid-breath, like it knew we were listening. We started moving faster, almost running. Branches reached lower than I remembered. Roots curled over the trail, like hands. I tripped twice, and scraped my knee. Kyle didn't even look back to check. I don't know how long we were walking, an hour, 2, but the trail wasn't right. We kept seeing the same broken tree, a white pine, with a spiral crack down the trunk. I counted it 3 times. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against us. The woods were bending, turning in on themselves. Then we saw the dolls again, tied to a branch ahead, like bait on a hook. One doll, this time, different from the others. This one wore a scrap of red cloth, my old shirt. I didn't even realize I'd lost it. Kyle snapped. He grabbed the doll, tore it from the branch, and hurled it down the ridge. I heard it hit something below, not rocks, something soft. Then everything went silent. No birds, no wind, just the breath between us. Then the scream, from below, so loud it shook, leaves loose from the trees. And then the laughter, closer, louder, mocking. We ran. I don't remember the next half mile, just flashes, light slicing through trees, the blur of trail signs. One of the dolls sitting neatly, in the middle of the path, untouched. We didn't stop. When we hit the gravel lot, the sky had changed. It looked wrong, like the color had been scraped off and painted over. A park ranger was there. Younger guy. Asked if we were all right. I must have looked like hell, because he called for backup before I even spoke. Kyle didn't say a word. The ranger said they'd had other reports. Not recent, not official, but whispered ones. A hiker back in '93 went missing near Indian Creek. Tent found intact, fire still warm. No gear gone, but 5 dolls were found tied to the trees around it. Kyle moved to Arizona a few months later, took a welding gig in the desert. He never goes near the woods anymore. Me, I stayed local, started doing trail work again for the Forest Service, but I won't set foot near Deep Creek, not alone, not ever. Sometimes I hear the laugh in my dreams, right after the scream, and sometimes, just before I wake, I feel something brush against my forehead, gentle, like a doll's twig hand. If you ever camp in Deep Creek, and you hear something scream that doesn't quite sound animal, and doesn't quite sound human, leave. And if you wake up to dolls above your fire pit, don't pack, run. I've lived in Sevier County most of my life. Grew up in Gatlinburg, worked out of Pigeon Forge, spent more time in the woods than I ever did in a classroom. My dad ran trail maintenance for the Park Service. I followed in his footsteps for a while. Seasonal contracts, fire line clearing, that sort of thing. I used to think I knew these mountains. I don't anymore. This happened in the fall of 2016. Late October, right as the tourist season started to die off, but before the cold snap hit. I'd taken a week off between gigs and decided to scout some of the older trails off Porter's Creek, spots I remembered my dad talking about, but never got around to exploring myself. He used to say, "You can feel where a trail's been forgotten. The trees remember." I didn't get it back then. Now I do. I was following an old overgrown cut off the Ramsey Cascades route, not marked on current maps, but I'd found a mention of it in a decades-old ranger log. Something about abandoned rail grade and rock bridge collapse. There wasn't much of a trail left, just a faint groove under leaf litter, and the occasional iron spike driven into a rotting cross tie. No signs, no blazes. After maybe 2 hours, the terrain shifted. The forest thinned, but not in the usual way. No brush, no downed trees, just a wide bowl-shaped glade, low grass, moss, and a ring of tall black pines leaning inward slightly, like they'd been bent over time. And the silence hit me. No birds, no squirrels, no buzzing. Even the breeze felt muffled, like the air had been wrapped in cotton. It wasn't peaceful, it was wrong. That's when I saw them. 5 crude spears leaned against the trunk of a dead hemlock, branches sharpened at one end, dark stains near the tips, brown-black and dried, not paint, not rust, blood. Near them, a fire pit, long cold, ringed in darkened stone, bits of charred bone inside, too small for deer, too clean for trash. My first instinct was to back away, but I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, and that's when I realized I wasn't alone. Across the glade, maybe 30 feet away, someone was watching me from behind a tree, not peeking, not moving, just standing, half concealed behind the wide trunk of a pine, covered head to toe in what looked like bark and mud, camouflaged like a ghillie suit, only rougher, more primitive. Their skin, what little of it I could see, was cracked and dark, as if it had never known soap. They didn't blink, didn't flinch, just watched. I backed up slow, mouth dry. The figure didn't follow, but somehow, that was worse. Like it didn't need to, like I was already in a place I wasn't meant to leave. I turned and walked fast, then ran. I didn't stop until I hit the pavement back near the trailhead. I didn't report it. Not right away. What could I say? that I found old spears and a person standing in the woods. I told myself it was a survivalist, maybe a poacher, maybe someone off-grid. But that didn't explain the silence, or the bones, or the way the trees leaned in like they were listening, or the fact that when I went back 2 days later, with 2 friends and a GPS, the glade wasn't there. We followed the same route, same topography, same markers. The iron spikes were still there. The slope still dipped the way I remembered, but there was no clearing, no circle of pines, no dead hemlock, just trees, dense, overgrown, tight enough that we had to push our way through brambles for 20 minutes before giving up. I didn't mention the spears. I didn't mention the man. I just told them I must have misremembered, but I didn't, because that night, I found something stuck under my truck's windshield wiper, a stick, sharpened, crude, roughly hewn, just like the ones by the tree. Wrapped around it was a strip of dark weathered bark, folded once, tied with a length of old leather cord. Inside the bark was a single pine needle, twisted into the shape of an eye. I burned it, not out of fear, not exactly, but because I knew it wasn't meant to follow me home, and I didn't want to know what might happen if it did. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing small things. The birds in my backyard stopped coming. My dog, a mutt I'd had for 9 years, refused to go near the tree line behind my house, and I started waking up at 3:43 a.m. every morning. For no reason, always 3:43. One night I looked out the window at that time, and I swear I saw someone standing just beyond the woodline, still, watching. I quit trail work that winter, took a job doing warehouse inventory in Knoxville, something with lights, with people. I don't hike anymore, not off trail, not alone, and I don't talk about this with locals, because the few times I've tried, the reaction is always the same. A pause, a glance, then quietly, "You went too far east." One guy, an old mechanic I trust, just said, "Greenbrier's got spots you don't walk through, not even when the leaves are down, not even with a gun." I don't know who or what that was behind the tree, but it wasn't just a person. It was part of the forest. It moved like it belonged, like I was the one out of place, and I don't think it wanted me gone. I think it was deciding, if you ever find a place in the woods where no birds sing, and no insects stir, and even your breath feels like it doesn't belong there, don't explore, don't linger, and if you see spears leaning against a tree, don't run, don't speak, just back away, slow, because if it watches you and does nothing, that doesn't mean you're safe, it means it's waiting. I spent 7 seasons doing backcountry trail maintenance in the Smokies. Started when I was 20, fresh out of a forestry program, young enough to think nothing bad could happen, with a Pulaski in my hand, and daylight left in the sky. I was assigned to a crew out of Bryson City, mostly grunt work, clearing blowdowns, digging water bars, flagging erosion sites. Sometimes we'd get called into areas too remote for volunteer groups, the kind of places where GPS gets glitchy, where the trails don't see boots for months at a time. This happened in one of those places, somewhere east of Gregory Bald, past the little 20-mile drainage. We weren't on a named trail that day, just an old work road that had mostly been swallowed by rhododendron and thyme. There were 4 of us on crew, me, Drew, our lead, Marissa, and a guy named Heath, who'd only been with us a few months. That morning had been normal. Early fog, birdsong, that earthy cold you feel deep in your lungs. By noon we'd cleared close to 2 miles of trail, and stopped to eat. I remember we were laughing about something dumb, squirrels dropping pine cones, or Marissa's busted bootlace, when we heard it. A voice, clear as anything, echoing through the trees. "Help, please, somebody please." We all went still. It didn't sound panicked, just strained, like whoever it was had been yelling for a while. Drew called out, You okay? Keep calling. Nothing for a second. Then again, please, please help. Farther off this time. Like it was moving. We looked at each other, unsure. There were no camps or shelters mapped in that direction, but hikers go off trail all the time. Drew muttered, could be someone hurt. Maybe fell in a ravine. We left our tools on the trail and followed the voice. That was our mistake. The woods got thick fast. Rhododendron closed in on both sides, that nasty clawing kind that makes you feel like you're walking through muscle. The light changed too, like the canopy above was thickening. Even though the trees weren't changing, the voice kept drifting, always just out of reach. Please, my leg. But the tone shifted. It stopped sounding desperate and started sounding rehearsed, like someone mimicking distress, like a recording just slightly wrong each time it played. We were maybe 20 minutes off trail when it happened. Marissa was in front, pushing through a tight corridor of brush, when she froze and whispered, back, now. I was right behind her. I stepped beside her to see what she was looking at. That's when I saw them. 2 people, low to the ground, crawling fast on all fours, their backs arched high, knees and palms, digging into the dirt, like animals. One was leading, the other just behind, and the one in the back, it had something red dripping from its mouth, not smeared, dripping, thick and dark, like it had just bitten into something warm. They moved in short, sudden bursts, twitchy, like spiders, heads jerking, elbows cracking, eyes wide, too wide, scanning low to the ground, like they were sniffing a trail, but they weren't tracking anything. They were circling. We didn't yell, didn't breathe, just backed away slowly. Marissa led, I followed, and the others caught the look on our faces, and didn't ask questions. We didn't run until we heard the giggle. That's what broke us. Not a laugh, not a scream, just a giggle, high-pitched, fast, repeated, like a child trying to copy a sound it didn't understand. We bolted. It took us nearly an hour to find our way back to the work road. My arms were cut to hell from the brush. Drew had a gash on his forearm. No idea when it happened. Heath was pale and shaking. Marissa didn't speak. Our tools were still where we left them. That almost felt worse, like nothing had happened, like the woods didn't even notice we'd wandered off. We reported a potential lost hiker to the ranger station that evening, gave the coordinates where we heard the voice. They sent a team out the next morning. They found nothing, no prints, no signs of camping, no blood, just a patch of disturbed leaves, 2 paths, low and narrow, weaving in circles, and 5 perfect claw marks, carved into the trunk of a beech tree. Drew quit at the end of that season, said he was moving to Idaho, never looked back. Heath only lasted 2 more weeks, claimed it was too hard on his back, but we all knew it was something else. Marissa transferred to a fire tower post near Highlands. She doesn't go into the woods anymore. Me? I stayed another year, but I never went back to that sector, because sometimes even now, I still hear it, late at night, when the wind cuts just right through the gaps in the trees. A voice, distant but familiar, please help, and then a giggle, soft, eager, like something still waiting for us to come back. If you're ever deep in the Smokies and you hear someone calling for help, don't follow the voice, don't leave the trail, and if you see them crawling through the brush, don't look twice, don't speak, just run, because they're not asking for help, they're inviting you in. I wasn't supposed to be part of the search. I wasn't law enforcement, wasn't SAR trained, just a local with hiking experience and time on my hands, the kind of person they let tag along when the official grids start getting thin and the hope starts getting quiet. It was October of 2003 when we got the call. A solo hiker had gone missing 2 days prior, near Elkmont. A 27-year-old named Drew Morgan, According to his girlfriend, he'd planned to follow the old logging grade near the Little River Trail, then loop north toward the Appalachian Club ruins, and meet her back at the car. He never showed. Rangers ran aerial sweeps. Dogs came up dry. The handful of us, mostly volunteer hikers, locals, and off-duty rangers, were asked to help search between the trail and the abandoned cabins. The terrain back there gets messy. Ravines, blowdowns, that thick Appalachian rot where every branch smells like memory, and moss. What we found had no business being there, and I haven't hiked since. It was day 3 of the search, late morning. My group had split from the main line to check a shallow gulch that looped down toward the river. There were 4 of us. I remember the light that day. Overcast, gray, but not threatening rain. Still air, no birds, not even squirrels, just the wet crunch of our boots in the duff, and the occasional two-way crackling to life. Then a call came in from another group. We found something metal, possible vehicle, about 300 yards north of the split. No trail access. Over. That got everyone's attention. There shouldn't have been a vehicle out there, not that far in. No road, no logging cut, nothing. We converged on the coordinates. Took us 40 minutes of slow, tangled pushing, and there it was, a van, an old Chevy G10, maybe late 70s, the kind with rust bubbles under the windows and chrome hubcaps, dulled to gray. It was sunk halfway into the soil, vines twisted around the wheels like they'd grown there decades ago. No tracks, no drag marks, and no clearing. It sat in the middle of thick underbrush, wedged between 2 poplars that hadn't been disturbed, which meant it hadn't come in. It had been placed, or worse, it had always been there. The back doors were jammed, but the sides slid open with a groan. Inside was a world that didn't match the one we were standing in. Clothes, layers of them, mostly flannel and workwear, folded neatly, covered in dust, canned food, old labels, SpaghettiOs, Dinty Moore, evaporated milk, not expired, not fresh either, and a cot, flattened against the far wall, with a weather-bleached journal laid open on top. Drew Morgan was nowhere in sight, but someone else had lived here. The rangers logged the site, took photos, marked it for extraction. But the weirdest part came when the chopper team radioed in, confused. They'd flown that exact grid 2 days earlier, had high-res photos. There'd been no van, no glint of metal, no clearing, just trees. They checked the footage again while we stood there, right in the GPS frame, and swore on everything holy it wasn't there. I took a picture of the journal before they bagged it. Still have it. The entries weren't dated in any clear way, just tally marks and sketches. One page was filled with names, all scratched out. Another had a drawing of the van from the outside, like the person was trying to anchor themselves to it, or remind themselves it was real. And one page, the one that haunts me, was written in tight, looping letters. The watchers stay far when it rains. They hate being known. When the wind is wrong, they call my name, in my own voice. Last week, they threw stones from the trees. They want me gone, but I have nowhere left to go. Another line below that, if you're reading this, leave before sundown. They get braver in the dark. Drew was never found, not a trace, no clothing, no blood, just a pack with some of his gear, discovered 5 days later, about a mile east, placed neatly under an overhang, dry, untouched, like someone set it there for show. The van was airlifted out weeks later. The news never picked it up. Rangers marked it down as a decades-old squatter site, unregistered, undocumented, but I've never believed that, because 3 months later, I went back to the coordinates, not deep, just to check. The ground was undisturbed, no drag marks, No tire tracks, no sign a helicopter had landed, and the trees around the site, they were closer together now, like they'd grown in. I've spoken to others since then, rangers, trail workers, even a biologist who quit mid-contract after a week in Greenbrier. Quiet people, haunted eyes. A few of them mentioned the same thing. Watchers, figures glimpsed at dusk, standing still between the trees. Voices, their own voices, echoing just out of sight. Thrown stones, and the same warning, again and again. Don't answer when it calls back in your voice. I've moved twice since then, got out of Tennessee. I still hike now and then, but only in open country. Places with wind, with birds, places where the trees don't lean in to listen. But sometimes I still dream about that van, sitting half buried in the woods, full of things that didn't belong to anyone. Then sometimes, when I walk past certain trees in a new place, I swear I hear something shift behind me. A voice, my voice, calling my name. If you're ever hiking near Elkmont, and you see something that shouldn't be there, a cabin, a tent, a vehicle that doesn't line up with your map, don't investigate, don't take pictures, and if you hear your own voice echo from the trees, don't answer, because it's not asking for help, it's inviting you in.